Serious? Have you ever known someone who wholeheartedly believed that they were wolfkin, a vampire, and elf had special powers, and couldn't handle the reality that they weren't when confronted? What happened to them? Had this guy in my shop. No idea how he made it through basic training, but this guy absolutely believed he was a werewolf. We were deployed and working night shift on the flight deck of an LHD, and the desk SGT told him to go do a job on one of the aircraft. He flat out refused, stating it was a full moon and he would turn into a wolf if he went outside. So, I'm true Flightline fashion, a few of us drug him outside. He was kicking, snarling, howling, growling, and when we get to the flight deck he starts wrenching and making weird screeching noises like he actually thought he was transforming into a wolf. He started saying, "You don't want to be around for this. I get very violent when I'm a wolf," then proceeded to jump and run around on all fours acting like he was a werewolf. I guess we are all just laughing our asses off. We knew he was weird before deployment, but no one really knew how weird, and we certainly weren't prepared for that. He was also the stinky kid in the shop. So, we striped his body wash to see if he was using it. He would strip down and go to the showers in a towel and shower shoes and everything. But he would stand in there and not turn the water on or just wet his hair to make it look like he showered. Well, after 2 weeks of the stripe on his body wash not being broken and him stinking to high heck, out SGT confronts him. He said that the water and body wash were bad for his fur and that werewolves don't like baths. So the SGT said, "Fine, we will bathe you like a dog then." So he tells SGT what's going on and his plan and gets a go ahead. Because at this point it's either what happens next or paperwork. 6 of us grabbed him out of his rack, dragged him to the showers, poured soap on him and scrubbed him with deck brushes. The whole time he was hooey like a dog and howling and barking and growling and all kinds of weird crap. When we got home, Gunny sent him to mental health to be evaluated, and turns out he had some sort of identity dysphoria and legit believed he was a werewolf. He wasn't in the Marine Corps much longer after that. A few of us think he faked it to try and get sent home early from deployment on medical, then kept it up when he realized he would be able to get out of the Corps early with a medical disability associated with deployment and collect a check for the rest of his life, which he does. I can't speak to the getting out of the Corps aspect of the story, but being afraid to bathe is a classic symptom of abuse, especially if he was weird before joining. It wasn't until I'd read several posts that I remembered grades 5 through 9 and realized that you were talking to me. None of your fantasy characters for me. I decided the reason I couldn't relate to others was that I was an android. I tried being Spark for a while, but when the Questa tapes premiered on TV, it felt like a better fit. It helped me to suppress my emotions. Instead of feeling left out and alone, I became an outsider, here to observe, but not necessarily understand, humanity. A motorcycle accident at 15 put an end to the fantasy. X-rays and an operation to repair my leg provided undeniable evidence against the fantasy. I did come up with some elaborate explanations, but each was easily demolished by logic. I eventually had to accept that I'm biologically human, even if I still don't get people. If it helps, I don't think anyone truly gets people. We're a strange species. This girl I went to elementary school with was a pathological liar. She thought she was an elf in middle school and wore elf ears to try to convince everyone. In high school she told everyone she was struck by lightning. She got a service dog, would randomly end up in the hospital for serious complications. She would be in very serious relationships all of a sudden. She should make a joint Instagram for them and one day she would be happy with them and planning a wedding, then the next day they'd be broken up. This was an ongoing cycle throughout junior-senior year. I used to work in a psychiatric facility with adolescents. We had a girl that acted like a Jedi. She would come out of her room in the morning rolling on the ground, shouting there were stormtroopers, and take her imaginary lightsaber and attack them full force. Every morning, she talked as if she were truly friends with Yoda and Luke Skywalker and would have full-on conversations with them throughout the day. She would also catch fairy-like creatures that would fly around her and put them in her pocket. When confronted, she would argue and say that whomever was arguing with her was a minion of the dark side and had their minds warped by Darth Vader. This went on daily for about 8 months. She told me that Obi-Wan wanted me to be her Jedi trainer to reach the next level in her Force abilities. After work, I wrote up a 20-page manual detailing next steps and fun little things to help her on her Jedi journey, incorporating reworded parts of her treatment plan. She was there for aggression and running away. Through her working in her Jedi ways, she learned what she needed to do to cope with her aggression, and part of it was a Jedi need not tell others they are a Jedi. Only the wise with the Force should be able to perceive those with the Jedi powers. She eventually told me she knew she wasn't a Jedi, her first admission ever, but that life was hard, and it was easy, 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 and it was easy. Her improvement rapidly brought about a release to return home. I don't know how she's doing now, but wish her nothing but the best. Yeah, unfortunately, because I dated her, we were still at school. I was 16, she was 15, and she was my first ever girlfriend. It was around the time Twilight was a huge freaking deal. So, she decided to tell me after seeing each other for about a month or so that she had multiple personalities and one was called Violet and she was a vampire. If I had a cut, she'd try and lick it, and she also gave me a love bite on my neck so bad it was black and hurt like frick. But she didn't stop because Violet doesn't know when to. Not long after this, she then told me that I was a werewolf because my eyes changed color from hazel to yellow, and she wanted me to scratch her with my wolf claws. Obviously this was news to me because I'm pretty sure I'm not a werewolf, haha. Why I didn't nope the frick out of there at that point IDK. But she then went on to tell me that she couldn't see ghosts but could talk to them and would proceed to have conversations with ghosts of dead relatives of people we knew. Needless to say, I then left, and how that whole experience didn't put me off dating forever I'll never know. Our werewolf, my ex, also insisted that I was a bird person from another planet while she was an incarnation of God herself. She would show me videos and booklets she printed out for evidence of the different alien races that secretly lived on Earth. Legitimately went through grade school, junior high and high school with a guy who imitated a dinosaur daily. If any of you have seen Step Brothers, the scene where Dale's dad, Robert, told the boys he wanted to be a dinosaur, he would chase cats, roar at people, etc. but finally had to grow up. Well, yes, I went to school with a guy just like that named Christopher. Ironic as heck is we were juniors in high school when Step Brothers came out. So Chris was actually an honor roll student, wasn't a total outcast and had a decent amount of friends. But he would perch his arms up like a T-Rex through the halls, and I remember seeing him in the lunch hall eat without his hands to imitate a dinosaur. It was beyond bizarre to see, but since he'd done it for so long it became regular. I actually ran into Chris a few years back at the local movie theater since I still live in my hometown, and he seems to be doing well. Has a wife, 3 kids and a steady accounting job. Due to us not attending the same movie, I cannot confirm if he used his hands to eat his popcorn though. Currently serving with a man who genuinely believes that he is a werewolf, lived in a 6 feet square cabin deep in Wyoming for years. This dude is off his rocker. We're talking howling at a full moon, sleeps underneath his bed every night, once scratched a dude during an altercation. You're welcome for his service, America. When I was in year 3, I thought I was a saiyan. I was one of few Asians in my school, and after the ep where Gohan teaches Videl how to fly, I spent weeks trying. I'm 27 now and I still feel like Goku. I was friends with a horse girl when I was a kid. She would neigh and trot around with her hands up like a horse, and she got teased a lot for it. We went to different middle schools and I eventually saw her again years later in our high school anime club. The club had a bunch of weirdos is it, but she was pretty normal then. High school anime club, had a bunch of weirdos. Wow, I would have never guessed. I know a dude had played a vampire LARP and did some other reenactment events, and for him it was just nerdy fun. Well, one frigging cold winter he's out and about doing the holiday shopping, and the warmest thing he owned was a big billowy medieval robe made out of reclaimed black velvet. This guy doesn't mind being the look at that freak guy, but he won't tolerate people fricking with him either. He's in the local mall, cloak billowing behind him, grumpy as frick because frick the public and frick the holidays. Some scrawny wannabe goth kid runs up to him. Kid looks absolutely starstruck. "Yes sir, are you a vampire? This is too good to pass up." Dude sees the kid by the shirt, spun to put the kid up against the wall and breathed silence. Fledgling. We do not break the masquerade, then drop the kid and billowed off with his majestic freaking cloak. A bit later he notices the kid talking to a group of other emo kids and gesticulating madly. He can't resist. He quietly walks up behind the kid and can hear a real live vampire is in the mall. And of course, all the other kids can see the vampire coming up behind their buddy. And they are all wide-eyed, and then buddy turns around, sees this vampire inches from him and looking murderous, screams and flees the mall like heck itself was after him. Dang, mall cop followed my friend around the rest of the time he was there. When Naruto was really popular, this girl walked around with crutches at my junior high. She hung out with some of the ultra nerdy kids, but she was okay. Nothing crazy or red flag type until this stint she did with crutches. She was in love with Sasuke from the anime and he was bitten by Orochimaru or whatever, and he got this black mark on his neck which meant he was a vampire. This debilitated the Sasuke while he recovered. So she was walking in crutches with a black mark sharpied in on her neck but with no boot or cast. So when she was asked, she would loudly shriek, "Don't you know? I was bit by a vampire." When our science teacher asked what happened that caused her to be in crutches, she flipped out because kids were already laughing at her for putting this show on, and yells at him, then storms out of class with her crutches. Weird times. When I was on the psych ward, there was a kid with a severe psychosis who through it believed that she was nobility, and that it was just a matter of time before her brother would come get her in his helicopter. It was kind of amusing and infinitely sad at the same time. She got better though. As her medicine kicked in, you could see the real personality poke through. There was a kid who was dissociative. I remember once asking what landed him in the psych ward, and well, he pushed back, of course. We weren't good friends, and you don't end up with dissociative identity disorder for no reason. His entire demeanor changed, even the way he sat and carried himself. He told me to frick off in a different accent and I did just that. It was really weird befriending both identities. I know this might not be the kind of thing you might have expected, but mental illnesses can also change your perception of reality, distort your memories, create false ones. Mental issues, behavioral issues, loneliness and other things can make you want to escape into a new form. But mental illness isn't escapism. It's losing yourself. Okay, this is really hard to type, and the first time I've said anything in a public forum. Only close friends and family have known. Also forgive formatting. I'm on mobile at work. Around 2009. Dates are fuzzy. I had this recurring hallucination of a blonde woman following me around. I started to listen closely to her when she wasn't paying attention, and discovered she was responsible for having me ejected from the council. I started to believe that I was some kind of powerful ancient being charged with watching over the human race. I spent 3 weeks in the psych ward, under 24-hour supervision, with daily psychiatric treatments, and suffered a major psychotic break when faced with reality. It took 2 years and a lot of good people for me to get better, but thinking about it still hurts. Nobody knows to this day what brought the whole thing on. I went to high school with this kid, fairly normal albeit a bit slow. He was in special ed classes, but not because of his learning disabilities. It was because he had behavioral control issues and he believed he was a dragon. Great kid, but he was prone to outbursts. His mom sewed him special socks with tassels that would flap when he ran, and he ran pretty fast. They looked cool AF the way they billowed in the wind. Either his mom was seriously skilled or he ran with grace. I think it was both, but they flowed like a daydream. I remember everyone was supportive of him but didn't really hold a conversation with him for long because he would just drone on and on. I remember going to his house one day because I stepped in as his bus para supervisor and he lived near me, so I was just going to walk home after he got off. He asked me to stay for a few minutes. He wanted to show me something cool. He brought out all these paper mechit dragons. Some were super crappy, I assume the first ones he ever did, and some were magnificent. Dad was an engineer. Those were his latest ones. We talked about them for a bit and I was going to leave to go home. He asked if I could stay a few more minutes to wait for his mom to get home so he could show me something cool. I agreed, and when mom came home he set stuff up in the driveway. I had no idea what was going on. It turns out he was a fire eater. He'd been practicing for like all of high school and took up fire dancing. what he called it, not sure if it's accurate. It was truly a beautiful display. His mom said it's what he wanted to do, so she allows it with supervision. I can't gawk enough about this kid. I'm not sure what happened after high school, but I really hope he got to use his talents. Dang, that's cool. His mom seems like a super supportive person. It's nice that he was dedicated and did something productive that had to do with his interests too. When I was a teenager, my family owned a small dairy farm. During the summer of my junior year of high school, we had an exceedingly dry summer. We could have well feed the barn with our cows, or the house, but not both at the same time. My father decided that was unacceptable, and got the old timer from the local town who had helped other farmers find places to dig wells. This old guy comes to our farm and starts walking around with 2 wire coat hangers that have been cut into an L shape that could be held with the short part of the L. He pointed the long parts of the coat hanger away from him, noted the spots where the coat hangers would cross one another. I had never seen water dowsing at work before, so I asked him how it worked. He said that if he walks over an underground stream of running water, his coat hangers would follow the direction of flow. He had mapped out where several branches seemed to meet and showed me the spot. From my perspective, it looked like he was full of crap and just tilting his hands and making the hangers swing. He found a spot that was reliably moving the hangers and asked me to try. I said that I would, knowing that this probably wouldn't work. It did work. As soon as I stepped over the spot on the ground that he did, the hangers moved on their own. I was shocked. At that moment I believed that he and I had special powers. My parents both tried, and the coat hangers did not move for them. We dug the well, and there was indeed a lot of water. My dad and the cows were happy. After that I thought magic was real and was a full believer. When I went to college, I majored in engineering. During my physics classes I learned about charge and how flowing water can be influenced by charges. I went from having magical powers to a somewhat poor capacitor. It was a bit of a letdown. Cool to know an actual scientific explanation for this old magic. I lived up the street from a girl who thought she was a vampire and could telekinetically move stuff with her mind. She came out of her room one day exclaiming to her mom she had bent a spoon. She claimed her friend showed her how to do this and she was just all around weird. Her mom told her you just bent it with your hand and she got really upset. I couldn't help but laugh. Probably not a good answer to your question. Met my brother at the pub, and one of his friends were there. He explained he was a necromancer, but assured me it wasn't some fake magic stuff. It was a real belief system. I asked him 0 questions about it, and avoided him ever since. He got it confused with necrophile. Common mistake. Lots of people make it. I met a woman who said she could communicate with trees. She really believed it, but I didn't see any reason to confront her about it. It seemed to bring her solace and really just amounted to her hugging trees on her own property and connecting with them. No harm done, and it had a positive impact on her. Maybe it was just her way of telling herself something in a way she could handle. Anyway, sometimes the voices in your head can be good friends. Once when I was in a psychiatric ward for a suicide attempt, I met a young guy who thought he had special powers. He thought that he had the power to manipulate people's bodies, like growing new organs on changing people's DNA. He was transgender as well, and one day he decided to become female and have a baby. Obviously, as the months went on, no signs of pregnancy appeared. I thought this would make him believe he didn't have powers, but instead he thought he had miscarried and got really upset. He actually was a really nice guy though, and he regularly tried to cure the other patients by manipulating their DNA. It didn't work at all, of course, but it was a nice gesture. Hey guys, I guess I could say I was this person too. I randomly said I was a wolf sometime in year 7, 11/12 years old, and until around 15 I proper was into it. It became part of my personality so bad that sometimes even now I'll catch myself doing something small, such as cocking my head, sniffing or yawning like a wolf. Complete accident. My new friends think it's cute, and my boyfriend calls me his pup sometimes when I'm really down. It really was an escape thing for me. I was so mentally ill and didn't realize that I was. I'm still not great, but I'm glad that isn't me anymore. The old friends I still have will joke with me about it sometimes, but I still write short stories and things about this wolf that I have a strange connection to. IDK. Feel free to ask any questions, Iglameo. We were little, but a girl I disliked at the time was going around telling everyone she was a vampire. She genuinely thought it was true after she bit a kid on a play date. It was kind of funny, because then the other kid thought that they were a vampire. It stopped after a boy got bit and said something around the lines of, "I'm not a vampire. It isn't working." At that point, no adults had been told, and the kids got called fakes. In the end, there had been like 4 vampires. Bite Club. A girl I went to middle school with believed that she was a dragon. I would see her go up to her locker and breath fire on it, then open her lock. She never went to our high school, and every now and then I occasionally think of what became of her. There was a little gang of Larpers at my university who turned into a wizard elf cult. They started out pretty normal as I understand it, just a group of nerds who hung out in a little fort in the woods and did whatever Larpers do. Their king was kind of a weird dude who walked around barefoot a lot but seemed basically harmless. Apparently he started getting increasingly controlling over his subjects. So first they all had to sit together in the cafeteria, and then they had to use their Larper names all the time. I think eventually they all stopped wearing shoes. They could only take classes he approved of. It was a whole thing. Turns out he'd convinced them he was some kind of magical elf lord who had unlocked their fantasy world other selves, through the power of LARP, I guess, and bound their fates together with his mystical powers etc etc. Eventually the administration figured out there was some kind of serious craziness going on. King Elf Wizard got expelled, and I think most of the cultists ended up dropping out. And that's why my friends and I had to convince several administrators we weren't planning on becoming cult leaders when we started a Dungeons and Dragons club. LOL. I knew a kid when I was young, around 9-10, who was a few years older than me. He was a neighbor of my best friend and absolutely believed he was a werewolf. He had a necklace that he wore to keep him from turning. He was a cool kid and we had fun playing video games playing outside. I feel bad because we always thought the werewolf stuff was silly and we would tease him about it. One day we were play sword fighting in the backyard of my friend's house and I pulled the necklace off and broke it. He lost it and bolted to the gate to run home. All the while I held his necklace in the air chanting, "Who let the dogs out? If you're out there, Logan, I'm sorry about that." There was a guy a year older than me in my high school who genuinely thought he was a knight, would act like one, super chivalrous etc at all time as well. He got sent to the psych ward for a while and came back at the end of the year as a mute, or at least rarely talked from what I remember. They shoulder let the knight kid fight the dragon kids. My mother-in-law. She thinks she has prophetic abilities that she obtained due to Project MK Ultra, and that the Mexican government has hired the cartels to kill her. They attempt to do this by engineering every mild inconvenience and irritation in her life in order to drive her to suicide. She believes the CIA still observes her, but is no longer actively trying to kill her. The only people in the world that she trusts are her daughter, my wife, and her old pod dealer, though she is starting to also trust her landlord, because she wants to get in his pants. We know this because she is scatterbrained and terrible at technology, and so she frequently texts my wife these things while addressing other people. Of course, she claims that this is just the cartels intercepting and redirecting her messages to make her look bad. She occasionally tries to use her prophetic powers to help people, like telling her daughter that I was abusive, or by giving me investment advice. She also used them to discover her landlord's sexual kinks, which he then accidentally sexted at her daughter 3 times. It's gotten less amusing recently, as she's started to believe that her daughter is part of this conspiracy and that she may have to be killed. Same with my father-in-law, her ex-husband, but she's afraid of him because he's best friends with the KKK Grand Dragon. My mill lives in the next state, never learned to drive, and is a frail old woman who probably weighs about 90 pounds soaking wet, so we don't feel endangered, but we do worry that she'll try to attack her drug dealers or a cop or something. I once had a psychotic episode, bipolar, where I thought my family were vampires and that I was going to get turned into a vampire and then I'd have perfect health, vision, not need sleep. When they took me to the psychiatrist, I thought she was the one who was supposed to turn me into a vampire and was confused when she didn't. I had a ton of other delusions too. This was just one of them. Happy to say I've been very stable for 3 years now thanks to medication and therapy. Okay, I was this kid though. I had used a spell I found online and wholeheartedly believed I had turned into a werewolf. I would eat raw meat, bite a lot of people, hated shoes and most clothing, etc., etc. I was sent to many therapists and specialists, most of which said it was a coping mechanism for some trauma I must have had. What started worrying people was when I started to grow hair and stuff. My sense of smell became quite good. I would stay up most nights and could see in the dark fairly well, etc. It was like I was honestly a werewolf. Later found a tumor in my brain that, when removed, I started to have doubts, my hair recessed, my sense of smell deteriorated, etc. The tumor has been on some gland that came from when we were monkeys, and had triggered it to start controlling more than it was supposed to. TLDR, a brain tumor made me a werewolf. OMG yes, my brother, he believes, he is a dragon, and he's also a furry, and he also believes he can see people's auras. He is such a socially awkward person, and I think in some weird way this is how he found community. Apparently there is a whole bunch of people who think they are dragons. Who knew? Now that he's in his 30s, he's grown out of it, or at least he doesn't talk about it or insist that people call him by his dragon name anymore. I'm under the impression that it was something that slowly fell away from his belief system, bit by bit, but one interaction sticks out in my memory. While we were on a long road trip, he was bitching about how our mother kept asking him all sorts of ridiculous questions like if he believes he can see the future, if he believes he can fly, if he believes he can see ghosts, etc. And I was like, yeah dude. She's trying to figure out exactly how delusional you are. Don't complain that her asking you if you can see the future is ridiculous while simultaneously claiming you are a dragon that sees auras. Keep this crap up and you'll be forcefully admitted to the psych ward. After that he stopped talking about being a dragon so much. Interestingly enough, on paper he's the most successful person in our family. Despite his social ineptitude, he's brilliant with computers. He had more money in his retirement account by age 30 than my mother has now, and she's like 2 years from retirement, and makes 6 figures. He lives with his girlfriend, who he met online, of course, and they seem really happy together, but he still has dragon art all over his house, attends furry events, wears a floor-length hooded cloak everywhere and spins around except a walking stick. Still a weird dude, now just a weird dude with a big paycheck. If you're poor, you're crazy, but if you're rich, you're merely eccentric. Throwaway time. I've been in these communities before. Don't get me wrong. There are plenty of very strange people in these communities, some who are very toxic and ignore people's boundaries. More often teenagers or young adults who are using it as a coping mechanism to help manage their emotions. There are plenty of nice people who are involved who are perfectly reasonable and will mostly keep it to private communities and not force it on others, including fairly well-adjusted adults. I think the most important thing is to be kind to people even if they are engaging in something you find weird. My conclusion is people sometimes believe weird things and honestly it's best to just accept it and move on given it's a harmless bee. They are otherwise decently adjusted. You should only be concerned if it seems to come at a detriment to their or others' health. Knew a guy who believed he was a vampire, just not on this plane of existence. He believed that he could astral project into said plane where he'd psychically feed off people from this plane. He met a homeschooled girl and convinced her that she was like them. He claimed that she got pregnant in the other plane and then ate her young once it was born. Nice guy, just weird. Knew a guy who believed he was a vampire, just not on this plane of existence. That's a new one. And convenient. There were a bunch of kids in my HS who were part of this thing where some were vampires and some were werewolves. I was friends with some of them, though I never participated in their thing. Though one of my closer friends there was convinced I was a werewolf and was desperately trying to get me to play along with her. Her reasoning was that it was because I loved nature so much. I'm a biology buff and wanted to go to college to be a zoologist. Ended up becoming a game dev lol, and my favorite animal happened to be a wolf. I never did play along with her in earnest because I really thought it was just silly, but I kinda eventually just went along and said sure, I'll be a werewolf, and for whatever reason she was the happiest person in the world when I said that half-hearted response. Like, The smile on her face, you would have thought it was her birthday. Of course they grew out of it, and we're still friends to this day, but sometime earlier this year I asked her why me letting her think I was a werewolf that made her so happy, and she said something along the lines of because I didn't like the vampire werewolf war and I wanted to be a vampire who was best friends with a werewolf, and for some reason I was really touched by that. Girl in my class would wear cat ears and a tail, a butt plug tail, and had a litter box she wrapped up when not using it and would use it in the bathrooms. Now she's in a facility for life because she has such severe autism and other disorders that she can't care for herself. Not sure if this counts, but that kid in primary school that also ate worms if you gave him 50 CTS believed that life is a video game and the principal was the final boss. That's adorable. My ex still believes that he shares his body with the spirit of a young female girl. Sometimes the girl would take over and he would talk in high-pitched girly voice and act like a girl. Last I know he is catfishing dudes in video games to believe he is a girl and have online relationships. Sounds like they are struggling with gender issues and deal with it in a very freaking bad way rather than actually thinking about it. My sister thought she was an emotional vampire. I told her, no, you're just exhausting to be around. She said that just proved her point. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.